Okay,
We're now recording.
okay. Welcome to the November meeting. This year has gone really fast. For as much trouble as it's been for most people, to me it's gone fast. I don't have any other announcements. Everyone should be getting the newsletter. If you're not, let me know. Send me an email or use the contact form on the division website. I get those emails. And I think Blaine got the clinic, so go ahead and start it up.
All right. This is my track plan. When I first got into model railroading, it mainly was just collecting railroad equipment. And it was that I didn't know what I wanted. Things about how to get started, and you have to start with a track plan. Well, this didn't come till much later. What I found is there's a number of steps that have to occur before you can have a track plan. If you're building a house, you have to have a plan. But there's some steps that have to occur before you have a plan to build a home. Number one, you have to have a dream. And go ahead on the next slide. We have a little boy here who has already built his pizza box layout. Now he dream and plan, and now he's asking, what do I want my train to do? What do I want as far as freight service, passenger service, revenue generating? Now he's starting to think in terms of what a model railroading, occurs prior to a formal track plan. And I get in a lot of trouble when I talk to folks and I say there's a bunch of steps that have to occur before you start building a railroad. And one of it's cultivating the desire and cultivating the interest and developing a person's understanding of railroading to get to these more complicated layouts. On the next screen, my first railroad layout that I completed was a pizza box layout. It was not a big layout. It was just a little pizza box. Al Hovey gave me the idea, and I thought, you know, I'm going to see if I can actually complete one this time. And so I got busy and bought some foam. I'm showing on the left score lines. When you buy 4x8 sheet of foam, it already comes scored. It. Slide. Then you can break the foam and put your tool on it and divide it up into 2-foot sections or whatever size you want. The first trick I learned after trying to paint foam and glue to it was you have to sand it. You have to rough it up. The surface up, and this makes it so it'll receive paint as well as receive glue in a little better format. I can still peel glue off of this. We use caulking and we use hot glue gun, and either one you can remove fairly easy from contact surface. The next slide you'll see a decision has to be made as to track. You want to advance that to the next screen? You can either do soldering or you can buy pre-manufactured track. Cato makes it. I've got, in fact, Al Hovey tried this on the right. I found on the left, it's a little bit complicated to try and solder the track. The first soldering joint is fairly easy. Track lays nice and straight, and you can pop those trail joiners in and solder them up, and they look real nice real quick. Flex the curve, that becomes a little bit of a challenge. I'll go through that a little bit, and then you'll see why going this other route might be more attractive for a beginner in model railroading. Go ahead, advance. All right, if you notice, when you connect up flex track, you've got those little pins that hold the track. And I'm using a rail joiner, code 70 rail joiners, to put them together. On the next screen, I flex the track and bend it around, and you know one section will become quite a bit longer than the other. The long section needs to be cut. Now I found on your clippers there's a flat side, and you want the flat side kept towards the rail stock you're going to be keeping. And so I trim, and on the top side you have to actually cut the plastic underneath the rail. As the bottom side you see there, I'm actually cutting the rail. So you flat side of the rail being joined, cut, and then the plastic underneath, then you can pull that section right out. You have to install rail joiners, and I see pictures are covering that. The rail joiner, when I straighten the track out, that long section wants to retract back into its original position, but I keep the clips from re-engaging. I actually move the track away from them so I can actually install a rail joiner and then the ties so that the doesn't joiner off, and it'll settle back. And on the next slide, it'll settle all the way back, and you just cut those little clips underneath that hold the track onto the rail. And then I straighten it out. I pin it down on the foam, and I make it a nice straight section, put the rail joiners in, and then solder it up. Again, I solder it in a straight format. I found doing this, I learned how to do my HO on my regular layout upstairs. Now I solder, when I go around a corner, I solder all of the joints straight. Because it's flex track, then I can move the flex track onto the road bed. And then don't buckle on me. I don't have any, what do you call those?
Kinks.
Right. On the next slide, there's the circle of track. I've given a close-up of the track, and you see there's no kinks. Nice, clean, easy to travel track. Now this, believe it or not, here's your track plan. It's simple, but for someone beginning, where they begin. My background is, of course, mechanical engineering from University of Utah, but also insurance sales and watching human reactions. And so bringing those two together, I'm noticing that people are not in the position where we think they are when we want them to begin model railroading. This is where they would be. On the next slide, they take out their pens, and there's your track plan. Now, if you want to throw in a switch, here's the time to do it. You can start making it a little more complicated. But I toot the track down, pull around. Now I know where to put my glue. I'm using silicone. We're
not hearing you, Blaine.
I'm not speaking. I'm waiting for the next slide.
Just really quick, there's some feedback. I don't know if it's coming from Blaine being on two devices. I have hear a high-pitched noise.
Does that help?
I'm still hearing it. I don't know if anyone else is hearing it.
There's a vacuum in the background. Catherine? Hang on a quick second.
It's really high pitched. I don't know if anyone else is hearing it.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Sorry, my wife is running our iRobot vacuum and it has a high-pitched whistle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a lot better. Thanks.
Okay. We glue the track down and pin it down, and then we just grab foam and start gluing it on. Again, I'm using caulking. In this case, I happen to have that tower already sitting around, and I thought, nuts, I'll use it here. I used some 1-inch foam and just started to stack the foam on top of it, each other a piece at a time. On the next screen,
So Blaine, I'm not sure I'm on the right or wrong slide here. So this is a slide where you've got the DeWalt knife.
yep,
That's what you want, or am I a slide behind?
well, you're okay. We've got the glue smeared out. We don't put a lot of glue underneath the track. You saw on the previous slide where I had just little daubs around, and I used a putty knife and smoothed it out. The reason is you don't want it to fill in between the ties and make it so you can't put down your, oh, come on. Don't get old, you lose your mind. Okay, the ballast in the track. Okay. On the next slide, I start cutting away. You save the pieces because you're going to use them again. And so I'm cutting and chopping into the foam, trying to create landforms. Go on to the next slide. There, I've taken some of the pieces I cut off and I've glued them back on. Now, in this case, I've decided to go ahead and put my leads on. So I drilled a couple of holes beside the track to put the leads in. And the holes are now drilled, and then go on to the next slide. And you see I've soldered the leads in. But this is all the wiring that you have to do. Very simple, not very complicated at all. And then I tape the wiring underneath. I know Jeff likes to create a little canal underneath it and fill it with glue, or to tape the wires in so they don't snag. You don't want the wires to pull out, but the wires are now glued in. On the next slide, 1.5 hours is all it took to get to this point here. You can spend this kind of time with a child. And I know Pete and Keith and Jeff have helped me a lot, and they can kick in if you have some ideas. Don't sit there and be quiet. I see Pete being quiet there. You can pitch in ideas on how to make this starting to round over, starting to chunk. Now, what was interesting is I was using my utility knife like I would a knife. And I was poking it and jabbing it, cutting it and slicing it. And then I had an idea, what if I drag my knife along the edge? And so if you go to the next screen, I found dragging likes to and that chatter starts creating rock faces. And I go, okay, I can do this. So I started pulling the knife sideways, and then afterwards I started sanding the foam to kind of smooth it down, and that worked a lot better. And the nice thing about Pizza Box is, so what if I mess up? It's only 1.5 hours, and for me, this was just garbage laying around the shop. But now I'm picking up an understanding on how I can create some rock face. Green. Okay, I have some people that glue foam vertically instead of horizontally, throw down some cardboard, not a lot, put in their portals, and start covering it with plaster cloth. Plaster cloth is a quick way. It hardens real quick, so you can begin to plaster all in one session. You can see, if you take a minute there, you can see it's not very complicated. They did cover the track so the plaster would not get on the track. That's critical to making life easier. Now you can put in, as you can see on the left, the person is digging out for a river. If you do, make sure you plaster the bottom of the river base. If you use realistic water or any other of those materials, oxygen in the foam will seep up through that and cause bubbles underneath your water formations. And I did that one where it looked great, and a year later, I'm starting to get bubbles. Okay, I didn't plaster the bottom in that area. So plastering the bottom of your riverbeds is very important on foam. Next scene. Plaster mix. We were just using plaster Paris from Lowell, nothing fancy. I know that Rob Spangler likes 20-minute plaster. You get it at a special place in Ogden, and I have a box of that, but I don't want to use that in pizza box. My goodness, that stuff's more expensive. So I just bought a $5 or $6 box of plaster of Paris. And then we discovered something. We can mix sand with it. A mixed ratio of 30% plaster to 30% sand. Color will absorb into the plaster and will show. And it gives it a sandier, grittier appearance, and it's more natural that way. So if you go to the next screen.
Blaine,
Yes.
on the sand, do you want fine sand or coarse?
I'm using screened sand. I'm sieves. You know, I screen everything down to as fine as I can get it.
Okay.
Now this is card plaster.
Looks good.
So on the scene on the right, I thought I'm going to attempt one of those you see down in southern Utah. But you see the plaster, the actual plaster color there is the sand. Now I've sprinkled sand below it, and you can see there's a contrast in color. Yellow ochre mixed in and some black wash, and I really didn't have to do a lot of painting because the color base is already there. Okay, next screen. Products for finishing. These are simple products. I know that you like multiple colors, but for the pizza box for the kids, we used earth undercoat almost exclusively. I do have a selection of yellow ochre and raw sienna and burnt umber and all of those favorite colors we use. But we found that we can move rather quickly through it with just earth undercoat, do a wash on the plastic or on the foam, and then start with your shakers, earth blend, burnt grass, fine turf, and coarse turf in that order, decreasing the amount that you put on as you progress through it. As far as bushes are concerned, we use Corinne Gerald's furnace filler trees, and we keep the trimmings. When we trim those trees, we can put flock on them, and now they're bushes. So we don't have as much waste as we used to have when we were cutting those little handmade trees. All right, next slide. Here's the plaster on your left with earth tone. You can see the plaster, the pink color coming through on some things. Then this little boy on the right, we actually had him throw in some raw sienna and some black and kind of mix the colors up a little bit. But he did almost all the work. And it actually looks pretty good. All he needs, now you're seeing something that needs to occur. The boy started saying, now what do I want my railroad to do? And he put a building on there. Now he's beginning to understand what trains are for. They're to transport cargo in his mind. And so he did a good job. I'm very impressed with the color and the look of his layout. And he's developing to where he can now start looking at making a real track plan. On your right is a NMRA member's first layout. What surprised me when we started doing the pizza box is how many adults came to our classes because this was it, wanted to learn how to do a layout. His very first layout, and it doesn't look too bad at all. In fact, it looks really good. He did watercolored, he colored, he used snow, he wanted a lot of snow, so he sprinkled snow on it, and it turned out to be rather pretty. Okay, next one. Michael Harris, you recognize this? Are you still with us? Okay, buildings were added when Michael Harris's son got through building his layout around the volcano. Then he said, I want my train to do something. So he put in a town. Okay, now the development towards being able to establish a track plan is occurring. Now he's going to want sidings. He's going to want, and he's going to start to dream. Before you build a house, you have to dream. You have to have an idea of what you want, or else the people in the planning office isn't going to, or the drafting office, not
hearing you.
Go on to the next slide. Okay, here's some more views of completed. The one on your left was actually a 16-year-old. He wanted to see what he could do towards creating different strata. And this little young man, when Walters came out with their contest, he wanted to participate. And there's some more views. Again, just simple 2x2. Homemade, handmade trees, handmade bushes. I think he used some of the coarse flock on there as well. Okay, next screen. And I'm noticing the adults that are participating are wanting to develop new talents, figure new ways, try something different. There's a number of reasons why, but generally they have one basic thing in common is they've never built a layout before in their life. Now this is a layout covered in plaster cloth. There's a close-up view of the mountain. Doesn't look too bad after, even though we use primarily earth tone, there's a couple of spots where the brown shows through and it gave a nice variation. And we threw in some black on the third picture there. And the thing runs beautifully. In fact, I saw it running just a week ago and it's perfect running. And he's got a side, there's a siding there for industry. And again, how can we make it bigger? How can we make it more complex? How can we make a railroad do what a railroad does? Next screen.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. Al, do you have any comments?
Just one, Blaine. Sometimes people are wondering where they can get the foam or get it home. If you go to Home Depot, you can buy 2-foot by 2-foot, 1-inch thick foam for about $6-8 a sheet.
Okay, Pete, do you have any comments? You've been one of our faithful instructors. You got to unmute, Mike.
Yeah, I keep forgetting I got to push the space bar so I can talk. No, I just, there's just such a great variety of them when you get the kids and their parents there that it's hard to point out specific features. I mean, the kids tend to copy each other, which is probably good, and the adults that get involved in it, they seem to be more into being unique about their work. But it would be nice when we'll be able to get back to this again, because I kind of miss the excitement that you get with the kids. It kind of spurs you on to go home and work on your own stuff.
Yes, I have to attend. I like coming home and pulling out mine, and I picked up a few techniques that I'm the soldering. You don't make sure your joints are soldered straight, and then bend the flex track. Then you don't have any kinking problems. The other thing was turning my knife sideways and dragging it sideways instead of trying to cut like you would with a regular knife stroke. That was interesting discovery. There's another one. Jeff Carter, do you have anything you'd like to add? He's another faithful member.
Just repeat what Pete said. It's fun to be with the kids and catch their excitement and watch the imagination turn loose. I mean, the one kid that did the Wreck-It Ralph and the Toy Story themed layouts. I mean, they were not a model railroad per se, and they didn't have mountains and streams and stuff like that. But my gosh, the imagination these kids come up with.
Well, Blaine, isn't Walters doing their contest again for 2021?
Yes, they
Yeah,
are. Do you
because
have any information on that, Al?
I don't have it in front of me right now that I sent it to you. It's called the National Build Off, and the information is supposed to be coming out in January or early February. And there will be a new division or a new open category. So some of the states like Colorado that were not able to participate last year will be able to participate this year.
yeah, I mean, I noticed that I'm on the Mall Railroad Hobbyist Forum every day, and there was a gentleman, I don't know what his official name is. He goes kind of by Mountain Goat. I think he was one of their adult winners, and he posted a lot about the diorama that he essentially built, which I thought was a pretty fantastic way of kind of introducing people and saying, well, you don't have to build an entire layout, just a diorama, kind of I guess you could say a square pizza box. And I mean, that seemed to stir a lot of interest in people, for particularly on the adult end. But anyway, I had one question about the sand that you added to the plaster. What type of sand was that? Was it just a regular sand from the big box stores?
Actually, the sand that I showed was from southern Utah. but I have used on Jeff's layout sand from big box store. As long as it's screened down, it adds a grittiness to the plaster that looks more natural than being just smooth plaster.
Can you just use dirt?
I haven't tried dirt, but that thought had crossed my mind, going in the backyard and digging, screening it.
Yes, you can. And one other hint, sometimes there are microorganisms in the sand out in the backyard.
Yeah.
If you bring in that sand, put it in a glass pie plate dish and put it in the microwave and nuke it for about a minute or two. That'll kill all the microorganisms and you can safely put it on your layout.
Mm.
Yeah, I just use the play sand that you can buy at Home Depot, and I found that you can get kind of a reddish colored one and one that's more gray, and then I sift it down to 4 different grades. So I got in HO scale, it's big rocks, little rocks, gravel, and sand.
Now, what's interesting on those carvings that I showed you with the spire, the talus that you see at the bottom was chippings that we never vacuumed it up or removed them from the set. I carved it out, left all that on the bottom, went through with the finishing process, and it looks like talus. So I cut out a step. I didn't clean the layout.
Guys, one other alternative in regard to building mountains, hills, or whatever is to wad up just plain old newspaper and make it various sizes and shapes and then cover it with plaster cloth. Looks absolutely great.
Yeah. There's a number of ways to do things. There's no one right way. Like there's 1,000 ways you can do pizza box. There's 1,000 ways you can do boxcar races. There's not one right way. People and help roading is perfectly fine.
Which is the theme of my clinic next month. That's going to be the way I do it. It's not right, it's not wrong, and your way is just as good as mine.
That's right. Well, Charlie, did we address the questions you wanted me to address?
I have one last question for Jeff. When he said he screens and has like 4 different levels, are you using different screens and smaller, and where do you get those?
I got the biggest screens from, I think, Walmart, and the finer screens I went over to Giggy's. That's GY, or whatever it is, over in 3rd West and just below 33rd South.
But I never heard of that store. What is that? Just like a home store or something?
It's a
It's
restaurant.
like a Baker's Home Depot.
Yeah, and in fact, tool guy that comes to our train shows, he had a 5-gallon bucket with 5 grits of strain. You just pour the sand in the top and it just shake the bucket and it automatically does all the screening into 4 different categories. And the bottom bucket is your finer tools that you can buy, but I've used them all and they all work just fine.
Yeah, for the finest grade, you want to swipe your wife's pantyhose once she puts a hole in them, puts them in the garbage. Take it out and use that to sift.
You can screen this stuff down to dust. Yes, I've got some screen stuff that somebody went out with asphalt. I think that's Robert Arneson. Asphalt and screened it down and ran magnets through it. And I got the dust from it, and that makes the best roadway. I've got asphalt roads on my layout. Keith, how's your asphalt roads look?
That's fantastic. It's great stuff. I've tried it around the streets here. You just go around to the asphalt roads.
You went on mute, Keith.
You have to hold it down, I guess, huh? The space bar.
Yeah, you have to hold it down.
All right. Yeah, it works great. I've used it on the roads around here, picked up the asphalt material, sifted down. You can get the sifting screens anywhere, Target, grocery stores, is where what other members have mentioned. And that makes a beautiful road. It's very impressive.
All right, if there's nothing, I think I'm pretty much through with my presentation. It's just I'm surprised that we have 20 adults, all of them NMRA members, most of them are anyway, who have built pizza box layouts, and it's their first layout. That's a total surprise to me.
So are we going to have a challenge here, Blaine?
A challenge?
Yeah, competition, building new layouts.